my mind immediately went to Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy, because we don't know what they look like. There are
Right.
statues of monuments and statues and photographs and paintings of Sims, but nothing of these young women except for their names and in what Sims wrote about them. And I just broke down in that car and I cried and I cried and I cried until I could get my bearings. And then I called the couple back and I said, "Have you ever heard of Dr. Sims?" And they're like, "No." And I told them the story and they were like, "What?" It's like, what? How come he's the man who's known as the father of modern gynecology?
Buckle your seatbelt and get ready for the podcast that will take you on a special journey designed to elevate and empower your cross-cultural appreciation for communities around the world. Hello, I'm Carole Copeland Thomas. I'm your host of Conversations with Carole, the weekly show that connects culture with collaboration and community. Welcome aboard. This is a subject that can be difficult to comprehend, but so important to understand because it is our history. It is not just Black history, it's American history, certainly tied in with the medical field. And I'm sure as you hear this encounterment of what happened in the past, then you will have a sense of why we need to understand these kind of topics and why history is just so important. I am delighted to meet and to talk this wonderful visionary leader. She is the executive director of Resilient Sisterhood Project, a relentless amplifier of speaking truth to power and never, ever, ever removing ourselves from the importance of history. And I'm talking to Lilly Marcelin. Am I pronouncing the last name correctly?
Yes, you are.
Marcelin, thank you so much for being a guest on Conversations with Carole. I want to take us back before 2012 when you started RSP, Resilient Sisterhood Project, and give us a sense of your background and why this birthing, if I can use that kind of symbolic metaphor language, is just so important for us today. Lilly?
Well, thank you so much, Carol, for this invitation. I am delighted to be speaking with you. I actually started the Resilient Sisterhood Project in 2012. Um, I back in well, I should backtrack. In my early 20s, I started to work with survivors of gender-based violence around the issues of sexual violence, domestic violence, human trafficking, even though back then people were not using the term human trafficking, but issues of incest, sexual assault. Now, fast forward, so I spent many decades doing that work, but fast forward to early 2000, I was working with a close friend of mine, primarily with survivors of human trafficking, with women from many different parts of the world, but primarily many of them were women of African descent, from the Caribbean, from different countries in Africa, but also women who who are born here. And I started over time. I kept noticing that many of these women were also dealing with serious reproductive health problems. So considering that these women are dealing with gender-based violence, so, just there's the violence and everything else that comes with dealing with such issues. But as I kept noticing that many of them were dealing with these reproductive health issues. And many of them didn't really want to talk about these health issues.
Of course.
And it also, and especially the fact that, of course, for good reasons, or for many reasons, they didn't want to talk about that. like occurred to me that I knew that there were many other women that I suspected or knew that may have dealt with some reproductive health issues or might be dealing with those reproductive health issues. You know, and I started to wonder about them. I felt concerned about family members I knew who dealt with those issues, friends, colleagues, peers, who dealt with reproductive health issues and who struggled with them, always in silence. And I was just always constantly thinking about those issues. So but then I became keenly aware that feeling concerned was not going to be enough. So so as a result, and as a Black woman, I decided to draw on our rich oral and cultural tradition of thinking of wisdom circles. I made a long list of names of friends, people that I know. And I approached them, kind of like individually, and just raised some of the concerns, what I've been observing and concerns that I have. And I asked them whether they would want to speak to me about one-on-one, if they wanted to, about their lived experiences with reproductive health issues. And many of these women were some professional, working class, young, older. Now, to be very honest, I kind of like anticipated that maybe 1% to 5% of the folks that I have on the list would speak with me.
Right.
But thankfully, and surprisingly, many of them, no, actually, everyone said yes.
Wow.
And it said yes, but also they felt a sense of relief, and they were kind of like surprised that there was someone out there concerned and thinking about Black women's reproductive health, to the point where I wanted to have a conversation and wanted to like talk and ask questions.
Well, you surely hit a pain point, and it was much needed timing wise, and that's why everybody said yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
was that the beginning of the Resilient Sisterhood Project?
I guess at that time, I guess it was, but I had zero clue that I was going to start an organization. But I just felt that I don't know. Maybe this was another call to action where I wanted to just hear and learn more about what I was observing. And I was disturbed by the silence. So then, so people agreed to meet at their homes. We met at playgrounds, libraries, wherever, but very quickly, many of these women would say, oh, you need to speak to my mom. You have to speak to my sisters. You have to speak to my friends. And the list was really growing. And I was like, ooh, this is really
referred you
growing.
to other women who were in similar predicaments.
Right. And so then I was like, oh, and I think one day somebody was like, why don't you come? Are you available on this Saturday? Come to my house. We'll have food. We can meet in the living room or sit at the kitchen table. I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of like became a pattern, because I had each group that I met with, had many people that they wanted me to talk to. So then I asked whether they would agree to, to meet, at each other's house. And so they all, so they all agreed. And then this is when they started to disclose just lifelong issues around problems, just diseases of the reproductive tract, like fibroids, endometriosis, polycystic ovary, PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, issues on gynecological cancers. Some of them talk about maternal health issues. And
any early comments about fistula? from the
No,
women?
no, none of these women dealt with fistula at all. No, so none of these women dealt with fistula at all. And so I will learn about, I believe, 2 years, 2 to 3 years before I started the Resilient Sisterhood Project. Oh, no. As I was in the process of creating the Resilient Sisterhood Project. So many of these women, so they spoke to, how these issues really affected them, and the feelings of confusion, shame, fear, anxiety, and just a daily struggle with those health issues. And so in the process, many of them, and of course, the medical inequities that they encountered, medical racism, the lack of explanation about those health issues, lack of just basic knowledge. There was a basic knowledge. There was tremendous knowledge gaps about these reproductive health issues. So anyway, in the process, many of them kept saying to me, "Oh, Lilly, you should start an organization. You should really do something about that." I've had the experience of starting I already had started a nonprofit with a friend of mine. And I have to say, I was like, oh, no.
You want to back away from this one.
Yes. But over time, the more I heard and listened to these women, and all of them kept urging me and encouraging me to do something.
I want to fast forward because we are highlighting a wonderful art exhibit that's going to take place on Saturday, August 9th, which is this coming Saturday, 2025, from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And it will be held at the Urban Farming Institute of Boston. The executive director there is Patricia Spence, very dear friend of mine. Tell us more. Again, we're just sort of zooming forward. We'll go back and forth. I want to hear more about this Dr. James Marion Sims and these amazing ancestors, teenagers, Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy. Tell us about this coming event that is taking place this coming weekend, Lilly.
Yes, I am delighted to do so. So the Resilient Sisterhood Project, we have 6 core programs. And one such program is art and reproductive justice. I think it's important that we use art as a catalyst, as a teaching tool to tell all kinds of stories, but also to teach, learn, inform about our history, especially for us as Black people, no matter where we are from. So in my late 40s, I first learned about Dr. Marion Sims, who's known as the father of modern gynecology. And I happened to learn about it because I feel that I was at the right place at the right time, which was, I'm a Wellesley College alum, and one of my favorite professors was giving a lecture on Mary, and the lecture turned out to be on Marion Sims, and the cool experiments that he conducted on enslaved women. So I remember I sat down in the class with my mouth actually wide open, and I had so many questions. And I also kept thinking, how is that possible that I never heard of that story? I feel that certainly I'm a curious person. I try to learn about things. I'm thinking, this is so important. How do we not know those stories? So when the professor was done speaking, I had many questions. But my first question was, I wanted to know how old these women were, because she kept referring to them as women. And then she said, Anarcha herself was 17 years old. Betsy and Lucy were 18 years old. To which I responded was that, I'm like, these were adolescent girls.
Right. These were teenagers.
They were teenagers.
And we should also say, time-wise, we're talking about the 1840s.
40s, right. So, and it's important for me to mention that it would not have made a difference whether, given the level of cruelties perpetrated upon the bodies of these adolescent girls by Sims, it would not have made a difference whether they were 35, 47, 68 years old. It would have been wrong.
Right.
But they were adolescent girls, and I felt that they should be referred as such. But upon learning that story, I just went home that evening. I couldn't even eat dinner. The following day, I woke up, I was feeling very upset and very angry. For about 3 days, I kept feeling a lot of anger about what I learned happened to these ancestors. By the third day, I'm thinking, well, clearly this anger is not for nothing. It's clearly I need to do something. So I started to do more research to learn more about Sims and to also learn about these ancestors. Unfortunately, there's the little bit that we know about these ancestors all came from Sims, Dr. Sims, because he published a lot of in medical journal back then. And, he talked about that he experimented on 12 enslaved women. These were his words. And then, but his focus was, he only talked about Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy. I have my hypothesis as to why I think he only talked about these three adolescent girls. But I felt a call to action. Now, back then, I didn't know what that call was going to be. I had no clue that it was going to turn out to be an art exhibition. But I knew that I felt a moral obligation to ensure that I would teach that history to other people. Because I feel that as Black folks, as I mentioned, no matter where we're from, we don't know so much about our history. And I think it's important that we find ways to unearth our history and to really and to tell those stories. But
in this case, when we're talking about Dr. James Marion Sims, who the father of gynecology, these three teenagers were involved in experimentation with fistula, which, and I want you to explain what that is.
So
there's a presumption that they either were pregnant, they had children, and as a result of their medical conditions, it led to his experimentation. So walk us through what that perhaps meant during the times of 1840, when these young enslaved women were being so brutally and cruelly experimented on. And let me say, it's experimentation and medical treatment without anesthesia. You put that in your information. I gasped when I heard that. But walk us through his relationship with them and the outcome.
Well, so fistula, I suspect it is a reproductive health problem that might be just as old as the earth, since birthing people have been giving birth. So in the 1840s, fistula was a problem for all women, Black or white. However, fistula was certainly a whole lot more problematic for enslaved women, because so fistula is a vaginal tear between the bladder and the vagina, and it leads which leads to incontinence and all kinds of health complications. It's very painful. It leads to isolation. So it's a severe reproductive health issue. Now, fistula is a byproduct of is due to protracted labor, where someone is in labor for many hours. But it is also a fistula is a byproduct of unspaced pregnancies, repeated rapes, hard labor, physical labor, malnutrition. So most if not all enslaved women, probably we could check the box next to any of those things.
Right.
Now, these adolescent girls, clearly they found themselves at the crosshairs of Sims because of protracted labor that led to the fistula. Now, they were all very young. Sims talked about experimenting on a dozen enslaved women, even though he primarily talked about 3 of them. But one was as young as 13 years old. So they were between the ages of 13 and 20. The oldest was maybe 21 or 22 years old. So they were very, very young.
Right.
They were practically children. So you have to think about, well, this adolescent girls, they were very young. So how many pregnancies have they already gone through? Who are the fathers of those babies? How many times were they raped? We know that they suffered, hard physical labor by nature of being enslaved. So these are all those things that I mentioned can lead to fistula.
And we're talking about Montgomery, Alabama. That's our location in the 1840s. So ultimately, Dr. Sims was the perfecter of, I guess, a medical procedure that corrected fistula that is used to this day. So, that is something that is significant. But the means to getting there is what we're talking about, these young girls who experienced as many as 30 medical treatments.
Anarcha, yes.
Anarcha had 30 procedures with him. She lived to be some 55 years old or so. So she did outlive this experience. There may have been a continued connection with him as he moved up from Montgomery, Alabama to New York. You've obviously done an awful lot of research with this. Why use the...
Now it's important to note that Sims, once he learned how to perfection the art of repairing fistula, he's also credited. He's the inventor of the speculum. So Sims he invented the speculum. He invented the silver suture. So till today, there are many medical instruments that when we, as a woman, when you go see your gynecologist, many of them were invented by Sims that are still being used. Actually, there's a speculum named after him, the Sims speculum. Even though I believe there was some people did work to rename the speculum to call it Betsy. It has been renamed the Betsy speculum because the first speculum that he used, I think he created, was first tested on Betsy, so it's called the Betsy speculum. So that name is being changed, but many instruments and some of the techniques that he used are still very much present.
Very
so he seems now, once he gained a lot of fame, because he's known as the father of modern gynecology. So he moved to New York. So he's the doctor who created the first women's hospital in New York. But at one point, he did go back to Montgomery or South Carolina to get Anarcha, where he brought her back for a short period of time to New York. Now, we don't know whether it was for him to show her off, not so much of her, but to show his medical prowess, because he was quite a showboating, and he was all about being recognized around the world, which did happen by using and exploiting the bodies of these adolescent girls. But he did bring Anarcha to New York for a short period of time and brought her back to the slave owner.
So this art exhibition focuses on, as you call them, our ancestors. These are teenage girls, the 3 that we're referencing, even though he experimented on as many as 12. We're looking at Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy. And that's the representation within this exhibit. And let me sort of tie in now Jules Arthur, who is the artist who has captured these experiences in at least 6 portraits that are going to be included with the art exhibition on Saturday. Talk to us about that. And his name is Jules Arthur.
Yes, and he resides in New York. So remember, I told you when I learned about the plight of these ancestors that I felt a call to action, and I wasn't sure what it was going to be. Now it's a very long story which I will not get into, but at some years later, after maybe it may have been some 5 to 7, between 5 to 7 years after I learned about the plight of these ancestors. One day I was visiting 2 friends, and they happened to have a painting of Jules Arthur, and I was quite taken aback by just how stunning that the painting was. And I commented on the painting. I didn't know who the artist was.
Right.
And they said, "Oh, this is made by a friend of ours." And I remember saying that, "What? You know someone who can do something like this?" I'm like, if I did, I would never speak to anyone. And so they went on to show me the other paintings by Jules Arthur. How about if we commission him to make a printing, to make a painting for the Resilient Sisterhood Project? And I was like, really, seriously? I said, yes. They said, well, is there, do you have something in mind? And as soon as they said that, honestly, I was in my car and I was like, my mind immediately went to Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy, because we don't know what they look like. There are statues of monuments and statues and photographs and paintings of Sims, but nothing of these young women except for their names and in what Sims wrote about them. And I just broke down in that car and I cried and I cried and I cried until I could get my bearings. And then I called the couple back and I said, "Have you ever heard of Dr. Sims?" And they're like, "No." And I told them the story and they were like, "What?" It's like, what? How come he's the man who's known as the father of modern gynecology? And they said, "Well, we'll introduce you to Jules." So when they introduced me to Jules, Jules is like the most humble person one could ever meet. Amazing. I think he's a genius. So I told him about Sims, and Jules was like, "What?" It's like I told him there was a statue of Dr. Sims in Central Park. And he's like, "But I don't live far from there in Harlem." And so anyway, so that led to a partnership between the 2 of us. So the way that the paintings kind of like, the way that we work together, I would sit down and I would write down, several paragraphs about so once I know that we could have those the paintings made, I felt that I could try to imagine a narrative arc story about these ancestors, these 3 women. And so I for the very first painting, I told Jules that we don't know what they look like, but you are an artist, so I'm sure that you can imagine what they would have looked like. And I myself can think that, they were 17 and 18 years old. So I said, could you paint them in a way to make sure that they look their ages, to paint them in a way to paint them with grace, dignity, to uplift their humanity. But I also, so I told Jules that in that painting, even though Sims is the elephant in the room, I wanted him to be in the painting, but occupying very little space. But I also I wasn't sure whether that was the only painting that we were going to have, yeah, at that time. So I said, as I know that being an enslaved person, you were all always under the gaze and the surveillance of the slave masters.
Right.
But where your gaze could never really be turned upon them. So I asked Jules, to also paint them in a way where these ancestors can turn their gaze to the world, but where people can look through their eyes and see their humanity. And so this, and of course, he was able to capture my words.
Yeah.
And I sent him a lot of information. We'd have a lot of conversations, and he would send me sketches. And then where he created this absolutely breathtaking, brilliant painting.
That is
and then from there, other people who were more or less familiar with Dr. Sims, I told them that I wanted to add more to
Yes.
to this to continue to tell the story and imagining what life would have been like for these adolescent girls during the 5 years because Sims kept them. He made a makeshift hospital next to his house where he kept them. So these adolescent girls would have known each other, would have witnessed the suffering of each other. And I think those of them, I don't know whether all of them, the dozen or so that he spoke about, whether they all survived. But I think for those who managed to survive, it's not because the post-operative care that they received from Sims. I think they probably, they survived because they were able to take care of each other because of sisterhood bonding that they have probably created with each other. I think that's what maybe kept them alive.
My good. I mean, I'm thinking of that hospital like a prison. And
yes.
also, I'm skipping forward to the 20th century with Henrietta Lacks, who we now know a lot of. Finally, her family in 2023 was compensated by Thermo Fisher. Any medical treatment today that we are experiencing, Henrietta Lacks had something to do with that. And then I think about the Tuskegee experiment that took place in Tuskegee, Alabama, and the men who were subject to government studies. So our country has to reckon with this kind of history, and the way that you are depicting it in terms of art is a brilliant way to really deal with that. Again, I'm going to give the date. It's Saturday, August 9th, 2025 at the Urban Farming Institute of Boston. Tickets are available. They're reasonably priced. The Urban Farming Institute website is
$20 per ticket. It's just
$20 per ticket, very reasonably priced. Urbanfarminginstitute.org is the site where it's going to be held. This will be an in-person event. Obviously, panel discussions will take place with the artists.
Yes, yeah. And we will have 6 of the paintings on site.
6 other paintings will be on display. Lilly obviously will be there as well. Give us your website so that people can go there and learn more, Lilly Marcelin.
rsphealth.org, rsphealth.org. Or if people do the Resilient Sisterhood Project, it will come up, and then they can go under art and reproductive on the menu bar. If they click on art and reproductive justice, they will get a chance also to see some of the paintings.
Great. And we'll make sure we'll have this information in the show notes so you'll be able to capture that information. In closing, we could go on and talk more and more. We'll have to have you back on at a future date. What keeps you going? Obviously, you've got to raise money. We've got a hostile federal administration that wants to cut off programs like this. They don't want to fund anything that looks like this. What makes you resilient as we look at your title, Resilient Sisterhood Project? What keeps you going in the face of new adversity that's taking place during this current administration, Lilly?
I think for me, my family would probably say that I was born a little rebel. And they kind of like do that. The work that I'm doing now is probably what they had known that I would end up doing what I do. I feel that as a Black woman, you know, we have had to encounter so many hostile, unjust laws, policies, cruelties, starting from with our ancestors, to present day. Those who always seek to traumatize us, to harm us, to impose injustices upon injustices on us, they are always unrelenting. So what keeps me going? I feel that I need to always be as unrelenting as they are.
Mm-hmm.
That is a part of my resistance.
Mm-hmm.
I remind myself that what we have been facing lately over the past many years, they are horrible, despicable, terrible. But our ancestors went through worse. So if they were able to endure what they did for us to be here today, I have an obligation to be unrelenting and to keep fighting and to resist. So the work that I do keeps me going. And it is part of the resistance.
You are fired up and ready to go. And I have 3 quick questions to ask you as we close. The first one is, what do people not know about you? Give me one thing that most people don't know about Lilly Marcelin.
Maybe they might not know that I'm an avid gardener.
Oh.
I love birds. Since I was a little girl, so I love all kinds of birds.
And number 2, what is your favorite book or movie?
Oh my gosh, I have too many.
Give us one.
Especially for books. Oh dear Lord. So as you can see, I have an accent, so I speak 3 languages. So I read books in all the languages. So I have to say, the latest book that I read, which I absolutely just loved, and will probably go back and read again, was James by Percival Everett.
All right. Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. And the third thing is, on your bucket list, where would you like to travel? What country, what state, where would you like to go?
Well, hopefully next year, I'm planning to go to Italy and definitely in France to visit one of my cousins, Iceland and England. So that's definitely those that's on the plan and for next year.
Excellent,
Yes,
excellent.
yes.
And may I want to just make sure our audience knows, are you of Haitian descent?
Yes, I am, proudly.
Yay, excellent. Very good. I've enjoyed talking with you and meeting you, and I know that there are going to be those who attend this event on August 9th. They're going to be satisfied to experience and witness something that most people don't really know about. And I thank you so much for bringing this kind of history to our attention because of the sacrifices of Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy.
I should tell you, Carole, I think it is important that we remember our ancestors because remembering is an act of justice. It's an act of love and kindness. So trying my best to remember this and honoring these ancestors is also to bring a little bit of delayed justice. But nonetheless, some justice to bring their stories to light. Excellent.
And certainly respecting their personhood too.
This is
the executive director of the Resilient Sisterhood Project, Lilly Marcelin. Thank you so much for being a guest on Conversations with Carole.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for listening to Conversations with Carole. Spread the word and tell friends and colleagues that this podcast is tailor-made for them. Make sure you subscribe, and we welcome your comments and reviews on your favorite podcast platform. Visit us at CaroleCopelandThomas.com and listen to all of the episodes and learn about my speaking services there. Thanks again, and we'll see you back next week for an exciting new show. See you soon.